Graduated from college in 1965, BA in History and Political Science. Got immediately drafted because this is the time of the Vietnam War. About 2.5 months later, I was on my way to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and did basic training there for about, I guess at the time it was around 16 weeks. When I finished basic training, because I had a college degree, they sent me to Fort Sam Houston. At the time, they had a social work program in the Army, so everybody had to learn how to be a combat medic at that time because you were going to Vietnam. But they also put me in what they call a psychiatric social work unit. The whole Vietnam experience was, in some ways, very surreal. I mean, in the sense that I had never learned how to drive before I went into the military. So one of the things when you were in Vietnam, they knew people got shot in Jeeps and trucks. So, everybody had to learn how to do certain things. So I learned how to drive through this military. I really had never flown. I mean, I had never been in a plane, and I find myself in Vietnam flying around in helicopters and that whole experience. Was very lucky to come out alive a couple times there. We were really in areas where we were shot up pretty bad. Very interesting experience going straight from combat back to the United States, where they were having all kind of protest rallies and anti-war deals. I come from a family where my father had been in the military, my grandfather had been in the military, and I really had not questioned the fact that service was something, that there was an alternative approach. And so I never thought about going to Canada, or I never thought about, doing any of that. But I mean, at the same time, I think coming back to Washington, D.C., where they were having huge protests and peace things, it was kind of traumatic. I got interested in social work when I was in the military and applied to Howard University School of Social Work in '67, so I was in the School of Social Work from '67 to '69. My dad was the Donald Murray who had integrated the University of Maryland Law School, and so that whole civil rights background sort of kicked in. And so I was always interested in how do you organize people to actually begin to empower them and take control of their lives. So when I finished Howard, I had a master's degree in social work with a specialty in community development. And I had a series of jobs. My first job was actually working with the United Planning Organization, which was the city's poverty agency. This was probably in 1970, 71. And actually was located at that time up on 14th and Euclid, which was in the heart of the riots. The riots had burned up all 14th Street and the whole area up there. And it was a fascinating experience, again, because it was sort of the center of, like now you have the Black Lives Movement, but this was sort of the center of the Black Power movement. When I first came to Washington, development was really from Connecticut Avenue back to Georgetown. And so what you see now, it's a tremendous change. There was no NOMA. There was no development on 7th Street. I mean, when you look at 7th to 14th Street, there was no development. 14th Street was essentially a red light district. You had the riots. I mean, people forget in '68, 14th Street was basically burned up. 7th Street was burned up. In Washington in 2015, everything's going to be developed, because essentially what people have now come to realize is that Washington is the nation's capital, it's an international capital, it's a world city. But I think the challenge is maybe, how do you have a city where you can have different kinds of people living throughout? And I think that there's a lot of skepticism in communities in terms of when you look at the progress from when Georgetown was pretty much a black community, and now you look at communities like Georgetown, it's basically pretty much a totally wealthy community. And then you had Southwest, and so I think the question for a lot of the long-term native Washingtonians is, who's going to benefit from this renaissance in many ways.